Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today on Todos Santos, we're going to fill in this whole area of shoreline, finish the town on the other side of the freeway, and most importantly, build a custom ferry dock to connect this town up with the old town. I used to be really bad on this series about leaving awkward empty gaps behind as I would do builds and then move on to something else, and then they would just bug me forever and ever. So I don't want to do that here. So before we move on to a new area of the city, I wanted to finish what we started here. So we're going to begin just with a very quick build over here. At this junction, a lot of the commercial zones that we have in the city are pretty dense along major avenues, so I thought it would be interesting to switch it up a little bit and just have a big paved over lot with a giant taqueria in the center. And because this main road that it's passing by is at the transition point between the highway that goes between these two towns and the arterial road that runs through the town of Gatonia, I thought it might be a good spot to have a restaurant, where people would drive by, they'd see tacos, and they'd be like, oh, let's stop for some tacos. Maybe this lot used to be like an industrial lot or something like that. That's why it's so big and a little bit worn down at the edges. But someone bought this lot and decided it would be a good spot for a restaurant, maybe for those reasons that I stated before. And this just strikes me as the sort of thing you'd see at this kind of transition point between the city and the suburbs. It felt a little plain just to have like this restaurant and some parking and a little seating area, so I thought I'd spice it up a little bit and take this building, turn it into a PO, and shrink it way down just so we can get the sign and get this branding on one of these barriers here protecting the seating area. So it's a little makeshift, not the most beautiful area, but I really like that, and it seems like it would be a fun place to hang out, other than the big arterial road right next to it, but whatever. Now, I did make a little park, which you can see on the left of screen right now. It was not very good, didn't turn out very well. I was using a real park for inspiration, and I just didn't really like how it came out, so I just cut that out, but it's there. I figured they would want a park right next to the lake. There's not really any other development along the lake, so they'd want to have at least a little bit dedicated to public access. Now, here's a definitely not public access area, which is a couple of communication towers. Not exactly sure how this kind of infrastructure usually works, but I'm imagining that they're cell phone towers that serve this area. We're going to put down the actual tower assets in a second, but they have a couple utility sheds nearby and some road access from the main intersection here. I had to change these dirt decals just a little bit, turn them a little bit more blue to get them to match each other, because it looked a little weird to have different shades of dirt, if that makes any sense, where the cars are going to be driving to access these. I'm using these amazing short grass assets by Ronix. It comes in both a ploppable building version that covers a wide area and a prop version, which you can use to fill in smaller gaps. And I just think that looks like the sort of maintained grass you'd see in an area like this, where they want to keep it clear of a bunch of stuff growing up and interfering with these towers in one way or another. Of course, as I say that, I add some dense grass and trees right in the same area, but I think you get my point. They keep most of the area clear. I'm just taking this radio tower and squeezing it way down with PO to make it really skinny. Not sure if that's the kind of structure you'd actually see in a tower like this, but we're just going to roll with it. Of course, they have to protect it with a fence, and that's that. Now, this neighborhood, I basically filled in exactly like Gatonia. Same sorts of houses, just an extension of that kind of logic. This interchange got some very simple details with those short grass props I was talking about, and a few trees here and there. All right, next stop is the ferry dock. All the way back in episode 11, several years ago now, I made this thing. It's a ferry dock. It's okay, I'd give it like a C+. But we're going to try again on the other end of this same ferry line, taking inspiration from the ferry terminal in Catania. We're not going to be recreating it, but we are going to take some details and try to make something equally interesting, hopefully at least. So first I need to get rid of the vanilla ferry terminal, leaving some people stranded out here in the water, but that's not an issue for right now. And then I wanted to build out a custom dock using these custom dock assets, surprisingly. I think these are by Strict Toaster from his CNews series back in the day. Such a great series. I'm just using the non-functional versions at first just to get the right shape and get a sense of how this area is going to be laid out. Because it's not just going to be the terminal itself where the ferries dock and drop people off and pick them up, it's also going to be a community area along the shoreline. We've done a few of those already, but I'm going to try to make it a little bit different. Of course, we need a road so that our ferry docks can actually be functional. And with that out of the way, we need to actually figure out what kind of building we're going to put on here. I tried several different things. I tried this office building, turning it into a weird flying saucer looking thing. That didn't work. I tried a warehouse because I liked the green roof. That also really didn't work, especially when I tried adding more things onto it, like this metal roof, like this glass roof turned green. Wow, that's ugly. But I eventually settled on this bus terminal, which is such a great asset. It is the City Bus Terminal and Metro by Boldly Building. Link in the description if you're interested. It's actually currently serving as our downtown bus hub, but that's going to change in a future video. But for now, we're using it for this ferry terminal. So it is going to end up having a place in our city even when we take it out of our downtown. So I'm happy about that. What I really liked about it was the asymmetrical shape. So you have it curving up on one side and curving down on the other. Plus all the bright colors. I just think it really fits the colorful theme of Todos Santos. We are going to alter it a little bit later on, but this is what I started with, and I think it's a nice looking transit terminal here. Of course, we also need to have this function, so I wanted to have these little like wing things. I don't know what they're called, don't know what the terminology is for ferry terminals at all. So they're basically just like little docks that stick out from the main terminal area, and that's where the boats actually pull up. I assume it has something to do with allowing them to be in deeper water, but I also try not to assume too much, because you know what they say about that. Of course, we have to drag our Old Town ferry line over here so that we can get people going back and forth across the bay. And then there's another ferry line that heads out of the other side that goes down the river, connects up with the university, and the rest of the city. We're also connecting up the bus line, of course, so that buses can interchange with the ferry, so it's not just a ferry terminal. All that space would also be dedicated to people waiting to take the bus to the more dense developed areas of town. Now, to get those wings that I was talking about, I'm just using these retaining walls by Cluse, which I love so much. I'm using the version with a little partition on the side just to keep people from falling into the water. It's only on one side, so it's only 50% effective, but I think that's good enough for our purposes. I thought the terminal looked a little too tall and monolithic, so what I decided to do was crunch it way down so as to not get rid of its proportions or like make it look too squished. I decided to mirror it and have two of them facing each other so that it kind of turns into one shape, but we're still able to make it smaller without distorting it too much. And I think it looks kind of cool how it almost has like a prow at the front, like they have like a little nautical theme going on here. Almost kind of looks like an abstract ship of some sort. Then, of course, the problem with this asset is that there is like this open area on the end where the buses would drive in and out, but I figured that would be a very nice viewing platform for people who are waiting at the ferry terminal. Or maybe people actually just go there to hang out and like admire the view across the bay, because you'd be able to see downtown, the waterfront park, the old town, the castle, all that cool stuff from here. I think I've rambled on long enough for now, so let's finish up detailing the ferry dock, and then we'll move on to the shoreline. Alright, I think that's looking pretty nice. I kind of like this type of build where they're fairly detailed and they come out fairly well, but there's really honestly not a lot of detailing involved in it. It was just like, you know, a few props here and there, a little bit of PO, a couple networks. Pretty straightforward and simple. And you could go into more detail and make it look a lot more realistic and fancy, but I think as it is, I'm very happy with it. And I think this is a level of detail that I'm happy to accept for most of the builds in the city. Now we have some plain roads here. They're pulling double duty. They are doing terraforming so that there's no ugly dips in the landscape up above. And then they're also IMT fodder, so we can put some lines down and make it a little easier on us to put down these fancy railings that I think look really nice. Because I want this walkway here that runs along next to the ferry terminal to be fairly fancy looking. Now, for some reason, decals and POs don't seem to want to take on these dock assets, so I have to lower them a little bit. So we just end up using the texture on the side, so if you looked at it down from the water, you'd be able to see the nice kind of marble looking texture. But from above, we're going to put down our custom decals here. I really like this red and gray printed concrete, I think it's called. I feel like it straddles the line between kind of fancy looking and kind of utilitarian looking. And that's sort of what I would like to go for. Nothing too ostentatious, but not too simple either. Of course, what else would we do in here other than a parking lot? There's going to be kind of a park and ride station on the other side. This side would probably be like employee parking and handicap parking as well. So just a pretty straightforward parking lot. I really like using these grass steps. They're meant to be steps, but I'm using them as like planters here. They're a lot more flexible than most of the other grass planter assets because you can actually stretch them outside of their original shape with PO, and it tiles the texture. So most things, when you stretch them with PO, the texture stretches along with it. And then there's like the ploppable grass, ploppable pavement mod, where you can't really stretch it outside of its boundary, even though the texture does tile. But then these, I don't know how they do it, but you could just like stretch them, and they're so flexible for doing this kind of build where you have weird angles and you need to shape things like this. Just a pleasure to use. I'll link those down in the description if you're interested in using these. I highly recommend it if you do these kinds of custom builds. Very nice mod. You do need the Ploppable Asphalt Plus mod. Be sure to read up on that, read the comments. There are a few tricks you need to do to make it work well in 2023. Anyway, we're moving on to detailing the front side of the ferry terminal. I'm just filling in the gap that's made by the road there. That's just meant to be functional so that recycling and police cars and stuff can access the ferry docks. So I'm filling it in with IMT and then just stretching our concrete dock asset to fit that a little bit better and form to the sidewalk. Also adding a few props, much like we did for the BRT build with these ticket machines, some bollards just so people can't drive into the ferry terminal, and a couple of benches, of course. I'm gonna take the tile decals that we put down on the other side and take the same theme over here. In the middle, we're gonna add kind of a nice little landscaped garden area because this is where the main bus stop is going to be. I figured the pull-up right next to the ferry dock would be like that's where people get dropped off by private cars or taxis or whatever. And then right past that is where the actual bus stop is going to be. And then there's just that garden I was talking about right there. So like if you were waiting for a bus, you could go and hang out there and not have to sit in the the stuffy ferry terminal for too long. It's probably not too stuffy. I mean, it's open on both ends, so like, yeah. It would be nicer to be outside, I imagine, at least if the weather's nice, which it always is in Todos Santos. I thought I was being clever here by using these retaining walls to make a little concrete plaza area for the garden. It actually ended up being way harder than it would have been to just use some props, so lesson learned, I guess. I have these cool seating areas. I forget who they're by, but there's a nice set of assets. Has a few different variations with little trellises on top, some planters, and benches. Really nice little asset. Great for filling in little nooks and crannies in your urban areas, but in this case, we're just using it out in the open in this garden. This entrance area needs just a little bit more TLC to look nice and seamless and fitting for the ferry dock that we made, so we're going to finish that up, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the walkway and the park and ride area. So this walkway here is going to be laid out just as a malecone along the waterfront. There's going to be a path here. Right now I'm laying down a road for the same reasons that we did before for IMT and terraforming, but we're also going to put an invisible path that runs through here so people will walk down here instead of going down the sidewalk on the road, which is nice. And then in between the walkway and the road, there's going to be the big parking lot I was talking about. We're also doing the same sort of decoration with these nice banisters. I just think it would be so nice to hang out here and look out over the water from this sort of area. And I think the banisters just really add to that feeling. Anyway, we're taking this invisible path, leveling it out so it, makes sense and people aren't like clipping into the ground and stuff. I find that really annoying. And I filled in the park and ride parking lot in the exact same way as the other one. A little less fancy, fewer angles and stuff, so I didn't show the footage. Pretty repetitive, just plopping the same parking lot over and over again. There's a paid entrance, of course, because you would need to pay to do this. There's no free park and ride in Todos Santos. They have some kind of practical-looking barriers, which I find sort of funny in the context of like all this fairly fancy decoration here, but I suppose it actually makes sense because they'd want to protect that stuff from cars. So yeah, I can see it. And then we just have to come in and fill in all this pavement. It's so satisfying to do that. And it can take something that looks really weird, like parking lot lines on grass, and just turn it into something that looks relatively realistic. All right, I promised that we were going to fill in the rest of the shoreline, so let's go. Next to the dock in Catania, there's what seems to be a community center of some kind that has an interesting building. So I thought I'd use this building that I happen to have in my collection. I believe it's from Toronto in real life. If not Toronto, from somewhere else in Canada. But anyway, I thought it would look kind of cool on the shoreline. It does sort of block the view, like from the road, from one small area, but that's not too bad for just this little stretch of road here. Just very simple decoration with retaining walls. I wanted to break it up a little bit and not just use the same style of quay here, so I'm just using retaining walls. And I don't think the original building is meant to be out on a quay like this, so I'm just adjusting it a little bit to make more sense. So we have this like truck entrance around back. It doesn't really make any sense that they would have that heading out onto the wharf walkway, so I just have some more fancy looking pedestrian entrances. And then the area for trucks would be out back where they could make deliveries over here. Even though the key asset is different for this area, I wanted the avenue with the bike lanes and the palm trees in the middle to be consistent across the whole area of the town. So we have the same decoration with the banisters pushed up right against the road to protect pedestrians from the cars and bikers passing by. Now sometimes in this kind of driveway system, you'll see like these really skinny curbs that just kind of stick up out of nowhere to show you where the lanes are. I think they're kind of funny for some reason. I don't know why. So I put those there just using the docks curb asset from Ronix's docks pack. There's also a little parking lot that has gotten all wet because it's right on the ocean. Honestly, it kind of looks like it's like eroding away and gonna fall into the ocean. But that's not my problem, at least not today. What is my problem is how to fill in the rest of the shoreline. Now over on the other side of the ferry dock, we're just going to add some private and public docks, just like we did back in episode 56 when we made that Bayside neighborhood. Basically the same thing here. They get connected to the road with some dirt decals that you could imagine people would bring their boats down, and there are a few boats parked here as well, getting ready to go out on the water. I just love these floating boat assets, they look so cool. And of course, being in a slightly more wild place, they get a nice fresh coating of trees. Now, in the town, I wanted to have a slightly denser area right next to the ferry terminal. Kind of makes sense that there would be more density that pops up around here. Lots of people go by here, so there would be some businesses, maybe some hotels, and tourist-focused areas as well. And a fairly nicely decorated street, just with some palm trees and planters. This building here on the right is the town's police station. At the time of recording this episode, I didn't yet have our custom Todos Santos police cars by Slyn. Link in the description if you want to download those for your own cities, but I'm going to come back and add those into that empty lot there. I developed the rest of this small town in the same style as Gatonia, mixed in with a little bit of the higher density that we just added. Now it's time to do this area of shoreline. So this is really where the urbanized part of Todos Santos is going to start tapering off. And again, I keep saying that over and over again, but I really mean it this time. There's going to be a lot of empty, undeveloped land here. So the area in between this town of Puerto del Sol and Esperanza, which is the town we made last episode, is going to be pretty much undeveloped, except for this one little area where there's going to be access to the bay, public access, in a big paved over parking lot just off the intersection of these two highways here. Of course, for public access to the water, we're going to need a boat launch. So I'm just using the classic retaining wall, trailer, pickup truck, and boat to make this place look a little bit more alive. As I mentioned last episode, this stretch of shoreline is not as beachy as the rest of Todos Santos, so we just have these breakwater rocks running along the whole stretch of shore. So because the highway doesn't really have sidewalks or anything, and I don't want it to, we are also going to add a path in between this parking lot and the town of Esperanza. So if people wanted to, they could technically like walk or bike between Esperanza and Puerto del Sol. As I was attempting to fill in the area here, I thought this parking lot looked a little bit bare and plain, so just adding some decals and cars, just to give it that little bit of life and wear and tear that you would expect from a place like this. And then we have all this green space in between the shore and the highway, so we need to fill it in with some trees. So we had to go through and add these decorative trees to the highway, and then I'm going to come in with this relatively new set of palms by Mr. Mason. They are acai palms. I believe they're from Brazil originally. I don't know if they actually grow in the Caribbean, but we're going to pretend that they do here because they just look so good. They come in a really cool clustered version that looks great for making forests like this. Next episode, we will be moving on from this area for now. Of course, there's more to do, but we filled in all these small little gaps that would have annoyed me forever and ever. So that's good to do, and trust me, we're going to do some fun builds in this area later on. So that's it for this episode of Todos Santos. I really hope you enjoyed your time in the city today, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Bye-bye!